Sinera Madani. Sinera Madani.
Without much further ado, I'd like to welcome Sinera.
Hi, I'm Sinera Madani, a mom of two, daughter of an immigrant, and an unlikely entrepreneur who built a billion-dollar business. Yes, billion. Now I'm doing it again and building my second unicorn, Worth. Shockingly, less than 2% of female founders ever reach 1 million in revenue, and I'm on a mission to change that. At CEO School, we mentor thousands of women to help them level up in business and in life. We believe that you deserve to have it all because honestly, nothing bad happens when women make more money. Grab a seat because class is officially in session. Welcome to CEO School. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the CEO School podcast. It's Sinera here, and today we are going to talk about the best advice I have ever gotten in my life. I've shared this advice with every mentee that I can, and you hear me talk about it, and if you've ever come live to come see me speak or keynote or at a retreat or an event. So it's not new advice that I've shared, but recently on the newsletter, so last week's newsletter, because I'm doing this in real time, you guys, every week. This is another week. I was just here last week sharing the things that are top of mind and going on in real time and being super, super present. So many reasons why I'm being present. One, it's a just huge health journey, obviously, that I've been on. But with that, there's been a lot of, mental journey and spiritual journey. And I've just been really focused on being in the present. And this season, I hope you can feel my presence. So this last week, I was writing the Big Business Energy newsletter, which goes out every Wednesday. So you guys get an episode on Monday. There is a brand new newsletter every Wednesday, and you should definitely subscribe to it. I'm personally writing it, and so I write it every Saturday morning. And so I was writing this next week's newsletter, and I was thinking about, and I was reflecting on just some advice, like just best advice that I've given. And there's one piece of advice that always comes super top of mind, and a mentor by the name of Kelly Cohen. She's still in my life. She is a dear, dear, dear friend, a mentor, an investor, a big sister, all the things. I met her very, very early on in my journey in Orlando, starting a business. Somebody introduced me to her and introduced her as the most powerful woman in Orlando. And I didn't understand that at the time, but it was very, very, very true. And so I was super grateful to have time with her. And she told me to bring a notepad to lunch. And I did not know what to expect from this lunch. And I'm so glad that I did bring a notepad because she filled me up with so much wisdom. And she sat me down and she's like, there's something about you that I just connect with so well. And I want to give you all the best advice that I've ever gotten, and hopefully be a mentor to you through, challenges and whatever experiences are to come. And so she was like, here's some things that I want you to right away, I want to share and want you to focus on. And so I started taking notes through this lunch, but there was one piece of advice that I feel like really, really stuck with me that I carried through. She goes, Sinera, people collect cars, people collect coins, people collect stamps. They collect things, lots of things. You're going to collect shoes and handbags, which I definitely ended up doing. But the one thing that I want to give you advice on collecting are relationships. Collect relationships, high valuable relationships, and start collecting relationships every single year in life and in business. So these relationships, you're not going to know right away that this is going to be a high valuable relationship, because my first question is like, okay, great. Where do I go find this network of relationships, Kelly? She's like, no, you have to invest the time to go collect relationships, and you have to invest in these relationships. And once you identify the right relationships, you continue to add on to these relationships. So every year, she's like, I started this in her journey, which was, maybe 10, 15 years before mine. So she's like, now I've got this amazing network of relationships that I can call upon, that I can go to, that I know somebody that's connected to someone that can support me if I ever need anything. And having a high valuable network like that, there's no price that you can put on that. And I fully agree. But I'm like, how do you go about doing that is my first question. And then two, it's going to take me time to go do this. Like how do I go investing? What value do I bring to the relationship or to the network? Because the first thing that she said is you have to create these relationships by you providing value to those around you. So without an ask. So collecting relationships, building on relationships, but doing it in a way where you're not coming in to be like, well, I need something. It's really about, I just want to invest in this relationship and I want to be able to provide value in this relationship. So much I remember, I remember that lunch so vividly and feeling I've got so many questions. And I will say that I took that advice to heart. And I think naturally, I think for us as women, I think for me personally, just a daughter of an immigrant, just the way that I grew up, I feel like relationships have always been very important. So I think I've always had a sense of family, even when it came to starting a business, how I treat people. I think those things have kind of always naturally been there. To recognize a human is what I'm trying to say in individuals. And I think for most us women, that comes mostly natural to us. And so it doesn't always have to feel transactional, right? Like I genuinely am interested in people. I genuinely am interested in helping others. I genuinely am interested in getting to know people. And so I think that part does come naturally, but doing it also in a way that it's like, when you don't have a ton of time, you're building a business, you're doing all of the things, like how do you actually go out to go and what do I have to offer, right? I think that was like also one of my things where I was like, what do I offer? But I do think that now I reflect back over the last, 15 years in business, and the thing that I have that is the most valuable thing is my network. It's the most valuable thing. And I've been such a loyalist too. Like what's been so amazing is that everyone that comes into my life, and whether that's been through work, through business, which is primarily most of my network has come through some sort of work thing, whether it's with my companies and the people that I got to work with, vendors that we got to work with, partners from work, people in the community, right? Boards that I've sat on, projects that we've done in the city of Orlando, then beyond, CEO school, relationships that I've met through the podcast, every single thing. Like I feel like I have been able to genuinely add and cultivate the most amazing relationships and even meet people in that way at conferences or wherever you go to try to, I've met the most incredible, most interesting humans sitting like right next to me on an airplane. And if I just had my headset on and didn't take a minute to say hello, I would have maybe lost on so many of those relationships that I've added to my network. And I've also been selective. So it doesn't mean that like everyone's just part of this like mass relationship network. These are genuine relationships. And something that I will say that I do believe that is what's taken place is not only have all these relationships like fostered the next yes or the next thing or created some sort of opportunity in different ways without me ever having to know when I would ever tap into that network or what that looked like. And I'm going to give so many examples here shortly. It's also created a sense of like just a genuine loyalty that I have to people as well. Most of all of my employees and team members had been with me for like once you're part of the crew, like you're just part of the crew. And that was not only from an employee standpoint, even with vendors, even with, extended relationships. I've literally had the same person for so long for everything. Like literally an example that comes to my head, like my hairstylist has been with me for so long. It's just how it is, right? Even my eyebrow lady, I've had my eyebrow lady for 16 years. She's been doing my eyebrows. I still drive 25 minutes the other way across town just to go see this one person. But I'm like, why change it? Like if there's something awesome about this relationship and I feel like I'm getting what I need, I feel so taken care of. I also of course, like there is even as something as simple as that, like I do feel a lot of loyalty to people. And I don't treat people in a transactional way. There's like a million places to go get. And this is right now we're talking just about like personal services and things like that. But this truly is applied to like every single thing in my life. I mean, I'm sitting here right now at the Hi Hello, studio. They've been with this podcast for almost 4 years, like 4 years. And, I can say this about so many things in my life, so many things in my life. So as I was reflecting, writing the newsletter, I shared this on stage last week I was keynoting this Sidekick conference, and which was the largest like franchise conference in the US. I was in Ohio, which was really random and still super fun. And it was 24 hours. It was my first work trip, end of summer, because I decided to not travel at all for business this whole summer. So I was fully present with my family. And it ended up, this was the first work trip that I had. And it was such an awesome conference. And I was so anxious. I was so nervous to deliver this keynote because it's a new keynote. And I hadn't done one in a while. And I always feel like I always get the crazy most amount of like jitters going on stage, no matter how many times I do it. But I was rewriting specific things for this conference. So I always like to like change it up a little bit. And this whole keynote ended up being like this brand new keynote, because now it's about this is the next evolution of my chapter. So I've been telling almost the same story for so long with Stacks. Now, I mean, I've had such a transformation over these last 2 years, and now building a new company, all the lessons. And so it was about my entrepreneurial path, but I specifically wrote about this conversation about not collecting coins, collecting relationships. And so I was reflecting on that, ended up writing about the newsletter. And I'm like, I'm dying to share this advice to you, because it's truly been, I do think that it has been one of the reasons of my success is this piece of advice. And I do see that people, especially with especially in today's age, right? We've become busier than we've ever been. And it's not our fault. I mean, it's the accessibility to everything. It's technology, the amount of travel that we do, because everything is now so accessible, like from a global perspective, from a business perspective, from a like just immediate, we're like this, instant gratification society. Like even the way that we order from Amazon arrives like the same day for us. And so we are this on-demand economy as consumers, as humans. And so although the human part of business, and this was last week's episode, right, which was we were talking about the value system and why it's important to build our teams this way. But I also think it's important for us to it's not our fault, but we've become so transactional in our day-to-day that it's actually seeping over in how we're actually conducting life and business in general. And I see this within teams, and within my teams many, many times. And I have to remind all of us that we have to slow down and focus on the human, right? I see this with, women that I'm mentoring that, are part of our coaching calls or on, advice that I'm giving, and I see things just moving so fast, or I see a lot of frustration. So even after last week's episode talking about team building and core values, and I still find most often that, we're not able to find, air quotes, the right people to scale up our organizations, but we're also not investing. It's become so transactional on both sides. And so I do think that putting the human element first really does support that. And I'm not perfect at it. So I don't want to say like I'm absolutely perfect at this, but this is always on like the forefront of my brain to say that whenever I do slow down, whenever I do focus on the quality of the human relationship, whatever that goes, it has always served me in the long run. And so I want to remind us of that. And I think it also goes back to just in this journey where I'm at of just being like very present in the journey today. And I want to encourage all of you that, we're all here. All of you are starting, are scaling, are exiting, are doing the most amazing things in this business that you're building. And if you're, you've put in, your why is so important on making this successful. You're moving at record speed to try to make it happen. And then we have life, right? And as women, there's so much on our plates. There's absolutely so much on our plates that it's also really hard, as much as you want to take the advice. And I've been in this journey for so long of like, I want to be able to be present. I want to be able to focus, slow down and go focus on these things. But speed matters, Sanira, right? There's so much happening. It's not your fault. So I just want to also first put that to the side, that it's not our fault that we're at this. It's just how the world works today. But because it's working that way, that's also why I feel like we have all of this stress around us. The chaos is so stressful. And I do believe that it's taking away from how we're doing business in the right way, not only as CEOs, but also, with the people that we're doing business with. And I think that if we can find a like-minded tribe, like-minded vendors, like-minded people, and continue to foster that the human side of it up front and really focus on relationships, it drives for the longevity of success. And an example that I want to share is, even with people, we have to put in the time to make people successful and to nurture those relationships with our teammates, right? Or our vendors. I can give an example. So many times where I've wanted to fire a vendor. When I'm onboarding someone, we have this huge project to get taken off and things are, in a great honeymoon phase when everyone's in it. And then sometimes things are going to fall off, right? We're going to all get busy. We're going to focus on other things, or the quality may not be there. There might be mistakes that take place. And the instant reaction is to say, oh, it's not working, and then to find fault and to continue down this path. And then it ends up being like, great, it's not working. And we need to find a new vendor, find a new teammate, find a new relationship. And that takes so much time to go onboard and to bring on somebody completely new. Versus if we actually focus on the relationship and checking in on the relationship, and it's not just business all the time or the transaction all the time, even when things are not going well, right? You don't just break up with your, it's not just like I'm leaving my husband over a fight, right? And we have to work on that relationship, and and you're not going to be perfect and your vendor's not going to be perfect, but it's still a relationship. You have to work on that relationship with people to make it work, because it's so much easier and better when you do. And when you have trust, right? And that's a huge part of what relationships are about, right? Relationships are 100% about the trust in those relationships. When I'm at the most peace, even with teammates, with vendors, with my staff, with anything that's taking place, it's because I trust the person, right? That's the key element of it. But how do you build trust, right? We just expect trust to be there. We have to put in the work to build the trust. That's a relationship. And so you have to put in the work to build the trust, and then you have to keep the trust. So you still have to check in. So just because there's trust, right, doesn't mean that I'm never not going on, I'm never seeing my husband, or I'm not going on date night, or we're not putting work into the relationship. It's super important for us to both put in work. It takes two people to put work into a relationship to continue to build upon that trust. And so I see so often that we either put in the work and then we're like, great, done, bye. And then it doesn't work out because we're not putting in the work in those relationships, or we're just not putting in the work at all and just expecting everything to be there from a transactional lens. And then when things do get hard, that the foundation isn't there, the trust isn't there, and it becomes really difficult to then put it together because it's always been about the transaction, right? It's always been about the work. And so it is important for us to foster relationships. And going back to the advice that Kelly gave me, I'm going to pass it on to you. And my key lessons in building and nurturing these relationships is, first and foremost, it is 100% quality over quantity. Okay. So it's not about who knows everyone in the room, right? It's about actual quality relationships. Who am I actually picking up the phone and talking to? Who am I actually spending time with, right? I know a million people. I've gone to a million places, a million conferences, million this. I'm 1 degree away connected from somebody. I know that my network has grown, and that's important too. But what I'm talking about is also the focus of high value connections. And in order for high value connections, in order for them to happen, there has to be some sort of actual time spent, genuine time spent. And it also has to be where you're the one that is adding in value, right? To build, both people have to add in value to a relationship, for a relationship to be beneficial. So it's not one-sided. So often I feel a lot of times when I head to places, or even in my DMs, right? So Carlina, earlier we were talking about what today's episode is going to be like. Carlina, my podcast manager, she was like, oh my God, I love this topic, because no one just wants to just check in on the human anymore. And she was like, I'm sure people have a million asks of you all the time. And she was like, let's check your DMs, right? And she was just pulling out. I'm like, people don't even sometimes acknowledge me as a person, right? It's just here's my ask, or here's my story, can you help me? And I love to be connected. I love helping, and I would love to find a way to help, but it's hard. You can't just start with an ask, right? So the second piece of it is really nurturing, adding in value to the relationship. And I've built the most, I do feel that way, that if there are so many people I've made amazing relationships with through digital, truly had never met in person before, but really fostered an amazing, amazing connection with, just because they genuinely wanted to say, hey, I don't know you. I'm just rooting for you, right? And I don't know how I can ever be of help, but this is what I do. And if I could ever be of help, just know that you've got someone in your corner, right? And I feel like I have made so many friends. I can name one, like literally off the top of my head right now, is my friend Nita Bouchon, who is, she's a spiritual coach. She's so incredible. She's part of our MFC network. I had never met her ever in person. I just started somehow, we just were following each other online, and just like through a friend. And she literally just would send me the most amount of like just amazing energy and love and positivity. And she'd just be like, I'm rooting for you. Right. And there's so many people that you start to notice that are just rooting for you without having an ask, without needing anything. And it was just I felt the genuinity in her cheering me on, and we got connected via Instagram DMs. And then I remember, she lived in Austin. So when I was going to Austin, I remembered, I was like, oh my God, I'm coming. Are you going to be at this event? Let's meet up. And we actually weren't able to meet up, but we were genuinely trying to build on this friendship, build on this. I needed nothing from her. She needed nothing from me. And we were literally two random digital Instagram friends. And then from there, she actually, I'll link her episode onto the show, but she ended up coming on as a guest on the podcast. We ended up, doing different things together through other digital communities. I don't know. It's just been this couple years of this awesome friendship. And now she's part of our Millionaire Founders circle, which is my inner circle, and it's us. And we just have the most amazing friendship. And I don't I genuinely just feel the love. And I do know that if I ever need anything that is part of her network, that someone's part of her network, or that, in her area of expertise, that she can connect me and then we can figure it out. And I remember going to her to give her a call post, things happening, in Palestine, and her and I were just connecting over this stuff digitally, and how she was showing up online and how I wanted to show up and the things that I was feeling. And, her and I ended up just getting on Zoom a few times just to hold space for each other. And this is a person that I had never met. And so when I truly say there's relationships, there's so many of those relationships in my life that have been fostered, and it could be through the DMs is where I was going with. But you've got to be genuine about wanting to build that relationship or wanting to root for somebody without having an ask of them. And if Nita ever needs me for anything, I'm going to be there. And she's never had an ask from me, and but it's one of those relationships. I'm going to be there. And so that's just an example of one, but I can name so many others. I feel like my manager Brielle. That's how we came about. I met Brielle she was recruiting me as a speaker for another conference. And so she was representing this conference, and she was looking for keynote speakers. And she ended up, getting in touch with me to deliver a keynote for Tennessee Women Connect, which was a conference that I went to a year and a half ago. And I just loved how she negotiated. I loved our interaction. I loved everything about her. I didn't want to go do this conference when she first reached out to me, because I was saying no to anything that wasn't just it was just been saying no a lot. And somehow she convinced me to not only say yes, but to then deliver a million things to this conference. And I'm like, wait, what just happened? But I never felt that I was I was sold to, or I never felt that I was pushed. I never felt I just felt like I wanted to do it for her. And that is a skill set. People just have this amazing energy and skill set, because I do feel in the genuinity of, even though she had an ask of me, right, through the conference, but somehow she made me feel valued, that I wanted to over deliver for her conference. And we ended up becoming, and that relationship, right, could have been transactional. It was transactional at first, right? It was literally her hiring me as a keynote speaker. There was a keynote fee. There was a service contract that went with it. I delivered the keynote. I did my job, and that could have been it. That could have been done. That could have been the relationship. And instead, she was just so pleasant, so sweet. And I just felt like through the whole conference, she just was she just wanted to make sure that I was taken care of, that I had everything that I needed. But also even after, I feel like she was just genuinely sharing her excitement about just, I feel like the way that she handled the social for the conference, like, I don't know, I just felt so valued there. And her and I ended up staying connected. And then I invited her I was like, man, the way that she represented her client, I was like, well, I was negotiating that completely by myself. I don't have a manager. Would you like to be my manager? And let's maybe start this relationship. And I always love starting slow, right? So you can build upon a relationship. It doesn't have to go all like it doesn't have to be 0 or 100. And so that relationship started with, it was like 3 months of dealing with that conference. Post afterwards, I'm like, man, she just did that so amazing. I'm sure you're representing other clients and other things. Like, would you like to represent me? And again, going back to air quotes, like the transaction part of it, but I wouldn't have done the transaction if I didn't feel the human part of it. And we hit it off. And from there, we have been almost inseparable since like the last 18 months. I've brought her into every piece of my world, not just the speaking world. It started off with that, and then it became about the other brand deals and the CEO School podcast, like representing my brand from a sponsorship and media perspective. And then that relationship continued to nurture. And, now, we've got a really, really special announcement, which I'm going to be sharing with all of you shortly. But she's come into this world really fast and strong, and, is a key stakeholder now in CEO School. And that relationship has gone to completely the next level, but it started off as a simple, just a working relationship. And so I just want to share, I can literally sit here and name almost every relationship in my life in that way. Even what I was sharing with the podcast, I've literally been with Carlos and Carolina in the first studio when this was a single studio here in Orlando. And my podcast manager prior to that, what's really interesting, I'll tell you a really fun fact about it. Our podcast manager, Caitlin Howard, who is still part of my network, who is also in my inner circle at Millionaire Founders Club alongside Carolina. Okay. I was with Caitlin for the first year of our podcast because we were virtual, right? So we started this podcast 2020, and I got a recommendation through a friend, and she had an agency, a digital agency to support digital podcasting because that's what it was at the time. And I had such a phenomenal relationship with Caitlin, and she did an incredible job on getting this podcast off the ground and supporting us in that virtual environment that we were at. And from there, as the podcast was scaling, I really wanted to bring the in-person components. I was looking for the next place to actually go physically, go have a studio, and to, just take this up from a higher lens of being in person. And that wasn't something at that time that was possible because Caitlin didn't live in Orlando, Florida. I needed somebody that was local here. And I ended up also getting a recommendation through a friend, which is why the network matters, because people do business with people. Again, I'm going to prove my point over and over and over again. I ended up getting a recommendation, and I came to come meet Carolina. And Carolina actually came to my office. So she came to my office, and we just had an amazing, I just loved everything about Carolina. She actually ended up doing a ton of research on me before she even met me. And she brought me the sweetest, most thoughtful gift. And no, I cannot be bought by love, by things. But she just went out of her way my father had just passed away in 2020, and she had seen that online. And she works with, works with local artists and stuff like that because they have a really cool creative studio. And she ended up bringing me this watercolor, just a small picture from one of my pages of me and my dad. And she was just like, I know it's our first time meeting. I know it's really weird, but here's this thing that I just had made for you. And I just felt like I need nothing. She just wanted to give me this. And it was a very human way to go about it. And I do not think it wasn't oh, here's me trying to there was a genuinity in what she was doing. And I was you're just, obviously I was in tears, seeing that also. We ended up not even talking about business. We ended up talking about a million different things I learned about her life, all the things. And then when I went to go see the studio, it was a small studio, but I'm like, this is gonna be amazing. And that's how I ended up choosing the studio that I'm in still 3.5 years later. But that didn't mean that my relationship with my first podcast editor needed to end. Obviously, the transaction needed to end. I couldn't afford to have two different managers, right? That wasn't going to work. But even how you treat people on an exit matters, right? And so just thanking, Caitlin and her team for all of the work that they did. And she was part of this whole transition process because this was a different phase of it. And even if things, I will say, even with other vendors that I can think of, I really, do try to make sure however you exit people out in your relationship, that speaks high volumes to that, how that relationship comes about. And I will say so often I've worked with people that didn't work out and then we worked with them later again, even employees, even like all the things, people come back into your life. As big as the world is, it's this tiny. And so it is so important to even just, if it doesn't work out, and that wasn't the case here on the podcast studio, but it is important for me to share with you. And I'm sharing these examples of these relationships just all throughout my journey. It's been so, so, so instrumental.